On this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, this is part 2 of Kevin Humphreys DSC. Now, in part 1, we talk about Kevin's journey from Katoomba, which is my small town where I grew up, and why he joined the Army, how he got into the Aviation Corps, went into Black Hawks, and then ultimately ended up as a flying instructor from Chinooks and leading the development of the Chinook as a combat weapon. In this episode, in part 2, we go straight to Afghanistan. Kev is the OC of the aviation element over there, and we get straight into talking about what it's like to fly the Chinook in combat operations, and particularly as Australia's first ever air assault for the Aviation Corps. We then talk about Kev's transition out of the Army and why he started Cor Infinitus, which is about the establishment of monuments around the country dedicated to people who have served the nation and have taken their own life. So, super powerful episode. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and get the history of Kev. It's really important. And then if you've listened to part 1, strap in because we're about to fly a Chinook into combat. Here we go. Mate, in the first episode, we talked about growing up in Katoomba together, what it was like being in, a small town, Blue Mountains. We talked about how you got into the military, how you ended up, actually achieving your goal of hitting Aviation Corps, being lucky enough to be Johnny on the spot of getting Black Hawk, and then Johnny on the spot twice and getting Chinook going and getting a qualified instructor course. And ultimately now you're sitting in Kandahar as the first company commander of Chinook in combat operations. Your personal life. You married this time, kids?
Yeah, married, 3 little kids, and so 3 children between the ages of, let me do the maths quickly, 6 and 1.5.
1.5. So little fella or little girl?
Yeah, little fella. Yeah,
little fella. Okay, so it's proper game on now in terms of what Australia is doing in Afghanistan. We must be probably RTF2 or RTF1, I imagine, in terms of what the infantry and engineers maybe are doing.
Yeah, I think it was the first engineer rotation came over halfway or towards the end of my tour. I'm pretty sure it was just SOTG to start with when we were there, from an Australian perspective. Yeah, and then engineer task force came in.
So without talking anything that we shouldn't be talking about, but you've got an SOTG element based on a force of SAS and a force of commandos out there conducting kinetic offensive combat operations. Where are you? What's your role here, and how are you synchronizing in with the SOTG headquarters?
Yeah, I was attempting to be a bit of a Swiss Army knife. So we were, if I remember correctly, we were OPCON to the SOTG, but allocated TACON and embedded in the US Army Aviation Task Force. So there was a big task force with like 20 Black Hawks, 10 Chinooks, 10 Apaches, actually more than that. It was more than 40. But anyway, a proper task force size US element. We plugged our 2 Chinooks into that. So we didn't do tasking directly to the SOTG. The SOTG had to put their aviation requests into the bigger system, and if those requests came to the aviation task force we were assigned to and we were available, then we would get allocated those tasks. But because we only had 2 aircraft and the nature of tasking for SOTG, specifically for Chinook, was going to be sporadic, it was seen as a far better way for our contribution to be made was to just plug our 2 aircraft into the bigger system, and we would work with Romanians one day and the French the next day and Americans the next day and Canadians after that and the Americans again and then the Aussies. So,
were they combat service support tasks or combat tasks with us, or were you dedicated combat only to the Australian, or how did that work?
Yeah, so we had to go through a build-up phase, and so that was combat service support tasks first of all. And so there was plenty of that sustainment tasks.
Stuff's going everywhere all the time.
All the time. And so there were different coloured routes called ring routes, yellow, brown, green, blah, blah, blah. And they were done by day and by night, depending on moon phases and all the rest of it, to all of the different FOBs. Then interspersed amongst that were combat support tasks. So we had to tick to make sure that we could do combat service support tasks first of all. Then once we had done that, then we could do combat support tasks. And there were a number of those, and we're talking artillery moves or what we might consider air mobiles in old Australian doctrine. So when we're moving troops to more than, say, 5 Ks or so away from any expected enemy location, then that was a combat support task. And so we get all the crews through that to tick them off. And then combat tasks were seen as air assaults. And so it took us quite a while because they weren't happening all the time. And air assaults were done by regular army sometimes, as well as by special forces. And it was just depending on the job and where it was, but they were few and far between for the first few months.
Mate, you have to excuse my terrible low-level staff talk here, but normally, like when you're going through some kind of readiness cycle, you get to training competency 1. Then you get to training competency 2, like you do a section thing, you do a platoon thing, you do a company thing, and you build your way up. But you're doing your own combat readiness appraisals in country, doing it for real.
Yeah, absolutely. So and this was part of me going over in September to do the recce. I spent many more hours than I can count sitting in the jump seat of American Chinooks, observing their missions across their full suite of mission profiles, to work out and then to do the gap analysis between their regulatory environment, our regulatory environment, their operational environment, our operational environment, to then do the gap analysis on the on our regulatory framework to work out what rules of ours would still be applicable versus what rules are no longer applicable because they are at odds with the Americans. 2 simple examples. They flew everywhere at 200 to 300 feet above the ground, and we fly everywhere at 50 feet above the ground.
Yep.
Right? And on top of that, we had a limitation of 4 hours of night vision goggle flight in a night. They didn't have a limitation, right? So
some ways they were more restrictive, some ways you were more restrictive.
Correct, that's right. And so it was never entirely one way or the other. There was always pros and cons, ebbs and flows. And so I had to do
Are you writing the manual? Like, we will fly at 50 feet or we will do 4 hours?
Yeah, that's right. So I came back with, laundry list of items that we needed to look at what we're going to change, do the risk assessment. If we were going to change anything, look at the risk assessment for it to work out what are we accepting here by changing and going to that, and then writing the information. And so I did the initial drafting of that, and then as part of the force, and then handed that over to the force insertion team. And there was a senior standards guy there, Dave Wallace, great guy, who then ran the ruler over us, myself and troop commander and another QFI, to get us certified, and then from there for the initial combat service support tasks, and then from there, just for the local area orientation, and then I certified everyone else moving forward from there.
I'm just sort of thinking at the moment, if you're willing to share a bit about combat operations shortly, but your gamut, your journey here of being the one that's sort of first in doing the recon, taking the first squadron in, writing the SOPs or writing the PAM about what we have to do, through to actually living it in these aircrafts in combat, moving it from combat service support through to combat support into combat operations. Did you, if you, I don't ask this, I've never asked this before, but the first time that you were in combat, was it in an Australian aircraft or an American? I literally have never asked anyone about their combat experiences, but was it with an American aircraft or an Australian? I just think it's important to set the context for your experience of when you actually start doing this stuff.
Yeah, so it was in an Australian aircraft. So so with the flights in the American aircraft, we never ended up in a situation where the aircraft I was in took fire. And and so it wasn't until we were in an Australian aircraft, and it was our first actual combat task that we did where we did that.
Because all things going well, it might have been good to get that experience.
Yeah.
To see, to test what you do. But you're literally at the point of the spear now and having to experience it. Look, mate, it's over to you. Particular situations that you may want to share about, taking that aircraft to its full combat capability. I'll hand the floor to you for a moment.
Yeah, mate. Yes, I mean the biggest job that we did over there was called Operation Nile, and it was our first, I'll call it proper combat operation. We'd had a couple of other ones which were deemed to be combat operations, but there was no enemy engagement as a part of it. This one was a Special Forces killer capture mission for a medium value target north of Tarankout in the Roscoe Valley, and by night, and we had Canadian and Afghan Special Forces in the back of the aircraft as the assault force, and there were going to be Australian commandos on the ground as a quick reaction force, and we had Dutch Apaches with over the top as air support for us, and then we had an American AC-130 and a Predator over the top of that. So it was a real multinational mission that we were doing for our very first live hit out.
Can I just ask on that, what do you feel that the planning process that you've got enough time to go through, 1/3, 2/3, all that kind of stuff, or is it, how much of it's cuffed, or the synchronization between the other forces?
We had a week to put together a combined air assault that we'd never done before, assaulting to a target that we'd never done before, and what we got out of that, what I got out of that, was that our training by this stage, right, Army general training and also Army aviation, the way we had improved our training iterations up to this point. Even I must, like, credit where credit is due. I did bag out Army aviation before about landing on a postage stamp. That was a war story. The philosophical elements that they were teaching, right, were second to none. And it's those philosophical elements that form the foundations upon which we were able to continue to build, right? So I know I bagged them out before, but like the foundations I was setting, the mindset of how to think, not necessarily what to think, were absolutely brilliant. And
flying competency, high level of flying pilot competency.
Yeah, and supporting the ground force, etc., etc. And so with a week's notice, we put together a combined joint international air assault to a target we'd never seen before. We'd never done an air assault to a target before. So we coordinated with the American task force to take the aircraft off the line. We did a surge of a couple of days to do our week's worth of allocation in a couple of days of hours. So then I could take the detachment off their roster. We could do a day's worth of briefing. We were already starting the planning. For those who weren't flying, we'd started the planning. And in the planning, the initial part of the planning was, I said, right, we need to be able to assault to the compound. And the Canadian...
To the compound. Land at the compound.
Land at the compound, absolutely.
How far from the compound?
10 metres.
10 metres?
Yeah. Okay, so to give you an idea, the rotor diameter of the Chinook is 20 metres.
Yeah, wow.
Right, side to side.
Hang on, 10 metres from the compound, so you're actually further from the other Chinook than you are from the compound.
Yeah, so we straddled either side of the compound. So the compound in the middle, and lead landed on the left as we were on finals, and we landed on the right. And our blades were about 10 metres from the 12-foot high earthen compound walls.
Do you get to do dry runs, like at a separate location, 100 miles away, or at the camp or anything like that, or?
Yeah. So in this week lead up, what we did was we went through the initial briefings, and then we didn't have any SOPs for this, right? So we need to write the SOPs at the same time as we're briefing and training the SOPs. And so I mean, I had absolute confidence in what we were doing, because I'd been spending a lot of time looking at down to aircraft reports, crash reports, sapphires, various things to look at why are these aircraft getting shot up. Why are these missions still failing and whatnot? For American aircraft and for other missions, our aircraft weren't getting shot up, but for other missions that were going on, special forces missions and regular force missions, why were they getting shot up? Why was it mission failure? Like, even if the aircraft didn't get shot up, how come they ended up with mission failure? That kind of stuff. And basically, it came down to a couple of things. One, first and foremost, the Americans, and I've got a huge amount of respect for the American crews. What they do is just incredible, and but they're also very, very predictable, and that's partly because of the size they operate at. They have to have a predictable way of them producing and generating combat power, right? And so the spotter network, that's very, very clever. Could see very easily whether it was a regular helicopter or a special helicopter, i.e. it had a big probe out the front of it, right? They could see whether it was a Black Hawk or a Chinook or an Apache. They could see what order they were going out, all these kinds of things, and report them, right? And so we had the advantage of not having a probe out the front of the aircraft and of regularly being involved in logistics missions. So and when I looked at where this place was located, said, you know what, we can replicate a logistics mission, because for some, logistics missions got shot at, right? Just because you're on a CSS task, that you don't put a neon light on the side that I'm only a loggy today, don't shoot at me, right?
Loggies.
Right. But for some reason we could fly the same areas again and again and again, and very rarely take bullets, right? And so I said, right, we are going to replicate a logistics task. So with the Chinook in particular, when you've got cargo on board, you quite often would raise the ramp and extend the tongue on the ramp, so it completely seals the back end and you can't see into it, right?
Rather than miniguns out,
Yeah, we had miniguns hanging out the front door, but out the back door, the ramp would be up fully. Now, when you've got troops on board, you almost always have that ramp open for airflow, right? But in this case, it was, sorry boys, you're going to be a bit hot and cramped in the back there, but it's so that we can achieve the deception plan. You also, when you're conducting logistics tasks, you typically use a different part of the airfield that's set up for logistics operations with MHE and pallets and all this kind of stuff.
From taking off?
Yeah, well, certainly for loading and for taking off and refueling and whatever else. So there's a few little different things that happen there. And so what I got the guys to do was to plan it so that we would replicate a logistics flight for all intents and purposes, with the tongue up, using a logistics park instead of a typical troop loading area and this kind of stuff.
Just in case there's a spotter in Kandahar airfield, a civic contractor that's on the take.
Yeah, spotters everywhere. You just assume there's spotters everywhere.
Yep.
And so that's how we set up the mission, right? And then coming out of TK, we would use the same area, the same route, as though we were conducting a logistics run to go up to the forward operating bases up in the hills, up to the northwest. But we had a hard right turn at a certain point. That was our initial point, and that was 2 minutes from target. And a hard right turn, we're now 2 minutes from target. We got what I call the hand of God, pointing the IR light down onto the compound
from the C-130.
Yeah, from the AC-130 as the final confirmation to make sure that we are that everybody is looking at the same compound, right? And so that was my call to confirm, yes, that is the compound, and then called that and continued. And I remember very vividly me seeing that beam of IR light come down onto the compound, giving the code word, and I just went, fuck, this is real. This is real. Better get this right.
You've got an important job at the moment. You're flying, 20 lads in the back. And I'm not being facetious when are you and the machine are one, or are you concentrating on the flying as well as the combat, or how are you breaking up your headspace to deal with this moment?
Yeah, so the co-pilot next to me, Dan Cash, he was flying, and I was running through the mission management, so making sure that we were coordinating. So the other aircraft was flight lead; they were taking care of the nav. Once we get to the IP, though, you take care of your own nav to make sure you hit your target.
Yep.
But yeah, so they had the same. Dirk Norderweir was the aircraft captain, did a great job as flight lead. Lockie Hayes was the co-pilot; he was flying. And yeah, in the same year with Dan Cash flying. So Dan was taking care of the flying component. I'm taking care of the mission management to make sure that we've got the right compound, the aircraft are there, all the other parameters are set, ready for us to be able to execute. And so as we came into land, I remember, on late finals, so we've got the compound there, we've got our landing pad identified. And you see this guy sleeping against the compound wall in front of us. So where we landed had a compound wall to our left and then a return coming across in front of us. That was probably about, 30 odd metres away, the one in front where we ended up, and the wall on the left. And he's asleep against the wall with his rifle next to him. And I remember saying, man, he's about to get the rudest wake-up call in his life.
Gosh. So you can literally see him, because by now it's walk, flopping in. That's how well the deception plan worked.
Yeah, absolutely. So we managed to get basically wheels onto the ground before there was any activation in the compound, and the guys. So we completely browned out in dust. So when we're still about 15 feet above the ground, the aircraft completely enveloped in dust. We couldn't see the ground, and so you're talking about making sure you hit your gates on finals to come down for landing. Well, that's exactly what it is, and it's all there for good reason, because we didn't have a runway to land on, we didn't have a centre line. We had a dirty field, ploughed field for us to land in and get completely enveloped in dust, and making sure that we stick the landing exactly where we planned it, and then drop the forward gear onto the ground. The ramp goes down, 35 troops out the back, turn right, directly into the firefight. And
so they are disembarking into combat?
Yep.
Straight into it?
Directly into combat, yep. So blowing the compound wall for the first couple of guys who got out, blow the compound wall and straight into firefight.
And when you just get out of there?
Get
back in the sky?
Yeah, so once the last foot was off the ramp, then all the checks were done in the front, the ramp comes up, and back on the clocks, and we had no fancy stuff in the aircraft, right? It's all hand flying, and back onto the gauges in the front, and pick the helicopter up vertically. The dust cloud's now 200 feet high, and till we pop out the top of the dust cloud and then fly down to Tarankout, our staging base.
I just can't imagine how vulnerable you are in those moments. Like literally you're in this big tin can. Number one, you're not on the ground until you're on the ground. Even if you're 10, 15 metres up, it's still a long way down. And this is how long is a Chinook, if I may ask?
Yeah, so it's 100 feet from tip to tip of the blades. So about 30 metres, give or take.
It's a big target to shoot at. Does the aircraft start taking fire, or?
So there were rounds and tracer coming up at the aircraft that we were aware of once we'd cleared the dust cloud. There was no, we weren't aware of any fire coming to the aircraft.
You wouldn't hear it anyway.
No, you don't hear it when it goes past. No, and go up out of the dust cloud. But the return going back in for the extraction though, that was sporting and
sporting. I love the term.
Yeah, and we found out afterwards from the extraction that there were RPGs going under the aircraft and over the aircraft when the aircraft were coming in for the extraction, which was some distance away. And after we got both aircraft on the ground, then and the LZ was secured by fire, right? We had the commandos for the extraction had created a horseshoe with their several vehicles, and so we came and landed in the base of the horseshoe. And they were securing the inner perimeter by fire, and the AC-130 was securing the outer perimeter by fire as we came in and landed. And we got all the aircraft, all wheels on the ground, and just absolute bedlam erupted all the way around both aircraft.
So for a layman, securing the airfield or the landing zone by fire just means they are blasting the shit out of whatever they can to suppress anyone from sticking their head up so that you can just get down, get the lads on and get out.
basically, yeah, that's it.
I can't imagine the chaos. You're saying brown out, so like, how do the lads even know what a helicopter is? Like, I know you can hear the things chopping and that, but like, is this some of the basic chaos?
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of chaos, but in this case, particularly for the insertion, right? We deliberately, very very consciously created the chaos, and the phrase was we create the chaos and we swim in the chaos, and the enemy dies in the chaos, right? Because we generated this weather event, basically this massive sandstorm right on the location.
The guts with lots of smoke.
With it. Yeah, absolutely. But coming into land to pick the guys up, they're standing there in chalks, and so we approach to just next to where the blokes are with the chalks, in their chalks, and so it's close enough that they're able to see the aircraft, clearly.
I can't imagine the drills, just the discipline to be like, right, lads, okay, line A, you're over there, you're going on that one. Line B, you're over there. This is why you're still in contact, still got people shooting at you.
Yep.
I'm just sort of visualizing this brownout or this dust. What's it like as you're punching up and through it, and then you poke your head out the top, and then you finally hit that moment? And is it relief yet?
Yeah, you're almost holding. You're not, but it's almost as though you're holding your breath as you're coming up vertically through the dust. And then when you pop out the top, it's you take a gasp of air. Again, you don't hold your breath, like you are breathing normally, because you've trained for this, right? You've trained again for each incremental element, right? So we hadn't trained with people shooting at us, but we had done dust landings and dust takeoffs again and again and again and again and again, right? They were second nature by that stage, and so it really wasn't a big deal. And so you just put the next piece of training with the other piece of training to create a new achievement, a new competency, right? And so you don't even think about it.
Sounds a little bit like no cuff too tough, mate. We can just get in there and do it. Just one last question, and I appreciate your generosity in sharing the moments. Not easy, I'm sure, but when you're on the ground and the aircraft has just disgorged the first set of troops are disembarked, but you've got to maintain the discipline to go through your drills, you and your co-pilot. You can't just like put it in first and drive away. You've still got to go through your deliberate drills, I imagine, to make sure that the airframe is safe and that you're going to get back off the ground again properly.
That's it.
It's again just training, I guess.
That's it. It's just training. It's just training. And so you work out a sequence, a way to do it so that the time exposure is minimised and safety is maintained. And so you give the call in that case, as soon as those forward gear are on the ground, I'd call ramp, ramp, ramp. I know the ramp is going down, and I immediately start doing the pre-takeoff checks to make sure that they're all done. And we've already trained this a number of times, so I know how long it takes to get 35 troops off the ramp. I know how long it takes me to do my checks, and I know that I can get them all done in that amount of time, so I can get them done in about 30 seconds. I'm then waiting for 10 seconds for him to call last man on the ramp, and I say prepare to lift, ramp up, come up. And the guys on the sides call clear up left, clear up right, and up we come.
And that's your first, the Australian Army's first air assault with a Chinook in ever, I guess, maybe since Vietnam. That's
the Australian Army's first ever live air assault operation. First ever, right? And come back to that petulant military jealousy. No one wanted to know about it because it wasn't Black Hawk and it wasn't Special Forces. It wasn't the SO crew.
When you got back to Kandahar,
yep.
What's, job done? So this is after, you landed, lads got out. Did you stay in the sky and wait for the job to be done and go back, or did you go back to Kandahar and come back again?
No, I went back to TK. It was only 15 kilometres away.
Yeah.
I went to TK.
2-minute flight or something.
Yeah, 5 minutes. So we sat on the ground there. Now, we were close enough. We could see the explosions in the distance through the night vision goggles, right? And we were listening on the command net to the firefight getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we were meant to go back in 40 minutes, but an hour and a half, 2 hours went by. And the guys were calling to say, hey, are you guys going to be able to come and pick us up? And I said, yeah, we'll be there. And Now,
Is this turning and burning? Is that what they call it?
yeah, we've gone back down to APUs, so auxiliary power units, so that we can maintain comms and maintain power. And it was pretty quick to flash it up and start again from there.
Yep.
And yeah, one of the pilots came over and said, "Hey, boss, don't make us go back up there. That's too dangerous." And I said, "Mate, I know it's dangerous, but we've got to go back." And he
The
said,
lads are up there, got to get them out.
"Yeah." And he said, No, it's too dangerous." I said, "Mate, there's 70 blokes up there that we put in, and we're their only way out. So I need you to go and get back in that machine." And now, to his credit, he did. To his absolute credit, he did. And another half an hour went by, and eventually the call came in. And both aircraft started up, and both aircraft took off without hesitation, right? But the reason he was concerned wasn't just because of the intensity of the firefight. Excuse me. It was also because we'd been waiting so long. The moon had gone down completely, and the way night vision goggles work is they magnify
some latent light.
Yeah, right. So in this case, we didn't have moonlight because it had gone down because we were waiting so long. We didn't have starlight because it was overcast, and we didn't have ground lighting because we're in the middle of Afghanistan, right? And so it was not only highly, highly dangerous for us to fly because of the tactical situation. It was illegal for us to fly because of the illumination or the lack of illumination, right? So and so when we left the confines of Tarin Kowt, the world basically went blank because the goggles were useless, right? And so we just picked the altitude up a little bit higher, had our speed a little bit slower as we trotted our way up. And now when we got to the extraction site, there was plenty of illumination for us to be able to see.
Lights going everywhere.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so look, I don't necessarily need nor want you to unpack any more of those. I think that the detail you've gone in that is enough. I'm sorry, a bit speechless, mate, just because, again, I just feel like my career as a loggy officer, it's just been the greatest spectator job. Like, it's like sitting front row, but you're not actually on the court, like with the warfighters. So I just can't help but tip my hat, mate, between you and the others that get out there and do the job. It is, because it's just it's rather stunning. Was there many more of those jobs over the next couple of months?
No, that was the one big job, if you like. There were a few smaller jobs, hovering up on the top of a cliff top, hanging over the couple of 1,000 feet of nothing, trying to back onto a cliff edge, and various other exciting things, and guys in later rotations did various other combat air assaults and the like. Yeah, I don't know much about those jobs, unfortunately, because I came home and fell in a heap a little while after that.
Do you want to talk about that? Coming back and what's next, and because I do want to get to Cor Infinitus and the work you're doing now, but there's a journey between then and now that we need to go through.
Yeah. So that was 2006, and as I said, the petulant military jealousy really took its toll on me. Things got pretty personal from a number of different quarters towards me, and in simple terms, it was just downright bullying, right? From officers senior to me, towards me, and eventually, and I went back again in 2007 for a few months to finish off the rotation of the first broad Chinook deployment, and then came back to Australia, and then the Chinooks went back again in 2008. But the wheels were coming off pretty badly for me.
You're still a major. You've been a company commander. This is not like you're, some junior digger being cornered in the back of the breezeway kind of thing, mate. You're a field rank officer, who's intelligent and has got a significant experiences behind him. I guess just that jealousy is the word. I just can't think of another word of where this is coming from.
Yeah. So I got field promoted in 2006 to Lieutenant Colonel, and substantially promoted at the end of the year. So I was a Lieutenant Colonel when when this continued to go down. Most of it happened when I was a major, but still as a lieutenant colonel, when it all unfolded, and this is one of the reasons why I was A, so embarrassed at the time, and B, why I'm now happy to talk about it, because I thought, how am I as a lieutenant colonel? I've been here and I've done that. How am I not able to handle this pressure? And again, kept thinking to bloody blokes in Vietnam had it a whole lot worse than me. World War II, Korea, they had it. You know, they had reason to not be coping with this stuff. And it wasn't. Whilst there was one incident in Iraq that caused me some distress, Afghanistan, from an operational, tactical perspective, you know, bullets and rockets and stuff, they weren't an issue for me, really. I mean, yes, I replayed some events for a couple of nights, but then after that I'd process it and move on to the next thing, right? They weren't a problem for me, but the people, the toxic culture in what seemed to be all-consuming at the time, but really was only in a couple of pockets, that's what really tore me apart. And yeah, even as a lieutenant colonel, you can fall foul to this. And since I've been talking about it, spoken to other people, lieutenant colonels, majors, various others who have also, yeah, Kev, your story's like mine, mate.
It's amazing because, you know, like I only made captain, you know, nothing special about my career, but there's diggers and corporals out there that think, you know, that I'm a big wig. And then when I look at half colonels, I'm like, geez, you know, like anyone in the ranks, half colonels, like, you know, way up there. But so it's the first I've heard about it from this experience. And why aren't you being celebrated or like honoured? Because what you and the other pilots did was quite, I don't blow too much smoke, mate, but it's quite heroic. Doing your job, though.
Yeah, doing the job, right? And we knew that it was, like I say, I knew and I told a number of people, that's the first live air assault Army Aviation has ever done, right? But unfortunately, that jealousy, the Black Hawk Chinook jealousy, the SO, non-SO jealousy, that was heavily influencing the senior echelons of Army Aviation at the time, and therefore it was not to be talked about, was not to be acknowledged, and was really disappointing.
Mate, you won, not one's not the right term. It's not something you win in a chook lotto, but you were awarded a DSC. Was that for that event?
Yeah, it was essentially for Operation Nile and the broader command of the Chinook detachment and taking it to combat operations, but yeah.
I don't imagine they're thrown around. I don't imagine there's too many of them around in Aviation Corps. You know, like...
My
first thing I thought was, should have been a DFC, mate. I don't know.
Yeah, DFCs don't exist anymore under the Australian Honours and Awards.
Okay,
so that was removed, and yeah, I was awarded that. So mine's the first. Oh, it's the second DSC in Army Aviation. The first one was actually awarded for commander of Rwandan operations. So it wasn't actually for Army Aviation operations. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And you know, it's sometimes it's used kind of cliche, right? It's not about me. It's about the wonderful men and women I was able to lead, and it's absolutely true. Like I didn't fly that mission by myself, right? I was one of 10 blokes who were out there.
Crew at the back were just as at risk.
Absolutely. Greg Mabe,
out the back.
You know, Scooter Wakeland, Tarquin Kennedy, Roy Payne, Lee Maloney. The 6 blokes did an absolutely brilliant job. Not one of them flinched, right? Every one of them was leaning forward to get in and do that job.
And that award is, I guess, collective. Even though you're the one that gets to wear it, it's team effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mate, just before we get on to, you know, getting out of the Army, I always just, again, it's just my thing, I just like to recognise Marcus Case.
Yep.
You know, aviation, he was a pilot as well, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was a pilot. I never met Marcus. I didn't know him. But yeah, he was a fairly junior pilot and was over in Afghanistan. From what I understand, looking at or flying, helping in some way with the UAVs that were operating.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
Just an
so
on-call role, doing something different. But
mm,
yeah, look, just part of the cost, that's, and I guess, oh, look, I don't want to really talk about VBC too much, but for me, this is really why why I still want to do working with the veteran community and that, because these stories matter, and those experiences of people that, we worked with and we served with, like, they do matter.
yeah.
Mate, when do you feel that your time in the army is coming to an end? Are we already there?
Yeah, we're basically there. So I contemplated suicide, had a breakdown, and thankfully didn't go through with it. And but then took 9 months to get back on my feet again, and I eventually got back to work, only to find out. And I had an incredibly empathic boss. Oh God, names just escaped me. An engineer, great guy, engineer. Who was my boss, got me back helped get me back on my feet again, and but then I found out that literally across the road in Army Aviation Headquarters, I'd been labelled as damaged goods, and no one buys damaged goods. So talk of postings and promotions, and if my name came up, then it was just shunned. So
is that because if you contemplate suicide, you're a nutcase, and if you're a nutcase, you can't fly?
oh yeah.
Sorry to be so blunt, but is that...
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, right? There's some merit to that, right? And so I was grounded. I had to go through a barrage of testing to prove that I was still of, sound mind and aptitude to be able to continue to fly again. But that took quite some time to get through.
But the experiences you've had, and mental health is, like nearly, I don't know, the human experience is very individual. But there's a difference between us going through these moments and feeling them and admitting them to others, which then brings it out into a profile which allows you to be judged for something that probably another half of the population deal with, but they just keep it silent.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I've been around this boy so many times. But yeah, I just didn't know. I thought it was just me, and I thought, wow, how's everyone else dealing with this, and I'm not. And the irony is that many years later, talking with a couple of people who knew me very well at the time, said, Kev, we were absolutely shocked when we found out. And a lot of them didn't know for years until I told them. They were shocked. They thought I was doing so well at handling one particular senior officer and putting up with the crap that was coming from him. That, yeah, they went, wow, if Kev's fallen in a heap with that, what hope have we got? So, yeah.
And again, this is, it's a very human, individual experience, but you are a Lieutenant Colonel. You're, I guess that's now maybe senior officer, maybe not, or maybe senior officers, brigadier or colonel or higher. But you're pretty up there, mate.
Yeah.
And you've got a wealth of experience and intellect and acumen, but you're not exempt from going through this.
Correct. No one is exempt.
So, did you? Okay, so well, obviously, Army's done now. Was it a bitter ending?
It was. When I found out that I'd been labelled as damaged goods, and and I was issued a posting order to some real backwater job that I didn't ask for, that took me away from my clinical treatment, and all this kind of stuff. Then I just knew it was going to get really nasty. And absolutely. And aviation's a small place, and the guy who ran the posting plot was there for another 3 years. So, was I going to wait it out in purgatory or go and do my own thing? And so I decided to leave. But I mean, I loved the Army. I loved everything that I did. And I did not want to leave, but I thought, I'm not going to hang around for 3 years and see what else comes down the road.
It makes me feel just like, I can't imagine how you felt about it, but it just makes me feel just a bit angry that we've lost this capability or this asset. Maybe you don't get CEO gig or maybe something like that, but the experience that we've got, I'm just thinking now from a professional perspective of having combat operations in warfare, just how valuable that is to hand down to the next generations of pilots. Like, that is Look, I don't know how many more air assaults we did, but these are limited experiences that we may need to call on.
Yeah, mate, I totally agree. And one of the things I came to realise as a part of all this is that the military does a brilliant job of taking an ordinary person, breaking them down, and then rebuilding them so the extraordinary is ordinary. That ultimately, every single one of us is a tiny, tiny cog in the big military machine. And when one of those cogs breaks, then the machine stops working the way it should work. And what does every commander need to do? They need to get the machine working again. And so, just the same as you said, the military is waiting to tell every single one of us that you're done. Then the military, and in this same kind of perverse way where we don't sometimes understand the unintended consequences, it's just, okay, small cog is broken, remove cog, replace cog.
And machine goes forward, cog stays behind.
Goes forward, cog gets thrown in the bin.
Yeah.
And we don't give that anywhere near enough credence as an organisation and individually what happens when you're that cog.
Flying?
Yeah, so I...
Get out, keep flying?
Yeah, so I left the Army. The very short version of this story is that I got offered a job to go and fly search and rescue for Care Flight, based out of Darwin, and it was my dream job. It was like, that's because it was Care Flight who used to fly over my house in Katoomba.
Yeah, back in the day, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So here I was getting offered a job with Care Flight, the organisation who gave me my dream to fly, and I was going to do it for them. Okay, it's in Darwin, so be it. Away I go. So 12 months to the day from the day that I had my breakdown, 12 months to the day, I took my first flight in Care Flight. And
like riding a bike?
It was in a way, but it came from a Chinook. It's the last aircraft I'd flown prior to this, and then jumped in a BK-117, which is a tiny little 3-ton aircraft as opposed to a 23-ton aircraft. It's got skids, it's got a rigid rotor head. It's a very different machine compared to the Chinook, but it was a ball. The tasking up there was amazing, and again, mate, we could talk for another 2 hours about some of the jobs that we did up there. It was great, and the guy, the chief pilot at the time, Jeff Koneman, ex-Navy pilot, absolutely one of the nicest, most competent men and aviators I've ever met in my life. He was just brilliant to work for and work with. Greg Olson was there as the head of training and checking. He helped teach me how to fly Black Hawks, right? And Greg has been one of my mentors all the way through my professional career. Great guy.
What a great way to round it out. I've got to ask, military flying is a little bit different to civvy flying. Did you ever get to throw it around a little bit with, the civvy, or have you got to just follow the rules and go in the box, up, down, can you sort of...
Yeah. I mean, at search and rescue, there's always latitude there, right? And it is getting more restrictive now. There's no doubt about that, because there's monitoring put onto all the aircraft, right? If nothing else, if for no other reason, there is monitoring put on so many of the aircraft now, and the monitoring is monitored. So whether it's the location or the angle of bank or whatever it is, then but no, it was, it was still pretty structured, the flying that I did, though. Yeah.
It's like kids these days have no fun, mate. It's all,
they
won't be able to get away with anything. I must admit, I am a nerd. I don't know where my phone is, that looks at flight tracker, and I'm like, oh, where's that helicopter above my head go to, and click on it and just see where it's going to, mate. So I know what you mean, being tracked. But so how long did you spend in your post-military flying career?
Yeah, so 12 years basically. So a couple of years for Care Flight, and but family was in Brisbane, so I was looking for a job in Brisbane, and I loved Care Flight, and they kept giving me more qualifications. They said, we want to give you more qualifications so you stay. I said, please don't, because more qualifications means I'm more employable, and my family's in Brisbane and they're not moving to Darwin, and so anyway, I ended up moving
so you were like MWDU at that time?
Kind of, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, like fly in, fly out, basically, doing the gigs up there, but coming back to Brizzy.
Yeah. And I wasn't doing myself any favours, because I wasn't sure if the flying thing was really going to work, or if I was going to go into consulting. So I was doing 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And in the 2 weeks off, I was doing a week to 10 days worth of consulting work. and then having a few days at home, and then go back to Darwin again. So I didn't do myself any favours, but it was one of those things at the time. And then spent 10 years with Queensland Rescue, then Emergency Management Queensland Helicopter Rescue, and then QG Air. So I was a flight instructor and flight examiner and chief pilot for a couple of years there.
You're still flying now?
No, so I finished flying a couple of years ago, but I've still got my licence, I've still got my medical, and I am actually looking at getting back in the cockpit. The scratch needs an itch, or the itch needs a scratch, I should say. And I'm actually looking. I went up in a Jet Ranger the other day with Scotty Summers, which was a hoot. Good fun.
So if you want to take the bride on a special date, you can still zip her out there with a little hamper.
Oh yeah,
fly her out to a little island somewhere.
Yep, you betcha. Yeah.
Mate, what are you doing now?
So now a mix of a few different things. Keynote speaker, coach and trainer with regard to all my life lessons basically around leadership and mental health advocacy. And the other thing that I do is I've got a charity called Cor Infinitus. Cor is spelled C-O-R. And Cor is Latin for heart. It's the root word of courage. And the original meaning of courage was to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. So where this came from was my own lived experience of suicidal ideation and the impact it had on my family. And, of course, so that was 2008 when I had my breakdown. And throughout the 2010s, the scourge of veteran suicide was everywhere in the news and in our faces for veterans, because I don't know of any veteran that hasn't lost somebody in their first or second circle of friends. And so that was everywhere. And then December 2019, one of the other pilots in my squadron, Steve Faisal, who was a Townsville local fella, he was in the squadron in Townsville and then deployed with him and flew with him in Afghanistan. He took his own life in December 2019. And so Anzac Day 2020, I'm in Townsville on shift with the rescue helicopter. Of course, 2020 was our COVID Anzac Day, so no marches and the rest of it. And I was on night shift, and so after night shift I went down to the local cenotaph in Townsville to just sit there, reflect, have a think about Steve, have a think about everyone else, all our others that have been lost in service overseas or at home. And I came around the corner towards the cenotaph in Townsville. There's an archway there and there's a rock plinth on the right-hand side, which is for the Royal Australian Regiment. And on the ground next to this rock plinth was an A5-sized funeral service booklet for Private Bradley Carr. Now, I never met Bradley. I do not know him, unfortunately. But he was born on Remembrance Day and he took his life on Anzac Day the year prior.
You're right.
And he was 34 when he took his life. And I was 35 when I almost took mine. And I got really angry. I got pretty upset and I got angry. I thought, you know what, is this the best the family can do by, remember their loved one who died by suicide by putting rocks on a funeral booklet? And so I looked around and I thought, I'm going to get a memorial put in right there, pointed to the spot.
That was their little reach out to connect him to the cenotaph.
Yeah.
And they're like, what about him?
What about him? Absolutely. And we remember him. And they put it next to the RAR memorial, right? Because he was an infantry digger and it makes all the sense in the world. But I know from my time in service that suicide is shunned, right? That people who suicide are seen as weak and gutless and, all the names under the sun. The families don't feel welcome on days of remembrance when their son, husband, brother, daughter has suicided. I know they don't feel welcome. They've told me that. And I need to do something. Right? Absolutely gut-wrenching. And I looked around and I thought, I've got to do something about this. And so that was, like I say, that was the day after Anzac Day 2020. And then on the 10th of September, World Suicide Prevention Day, we unveiled that memorial. And along the course of that 5 months, I realised a number of things. One, it's obvious it's not a Townsville problem and it's not Bradley or Stephen, right? This is a national issue. This is a human issue. and so this is bigger than them, and it's bigger than me. And so the memorial is completely anonymous. It doesn't represent any person, era, circumstance. It is dedicated to those who've served our nation and been overwhelmed by the battle within. That's the wording on the dedication plaque. And then thought it needs to be called something so that it's an actual thing, right? So that's where the name Cor Infinitus came from, infinite courage. And it's actually for the families. All of this is to give the families who are left behind, to give them dignity and respect. And I actually think it's the families who need infinite courage, right? Yes, we can honour the loved ones who are gone, but it's the families who are left behind that now need the infinite courage for them to be able to continue to go on. And in putting this together, looking at the psychological safety of it, because memorials to suicide are really seen as a double-edged sword. I worked with some clinicians, and there are help numbers on the memorial, on the plaques, right, for people who are vulnerable when they're there to be able to get help immediately if they want it. But importantly, and this is the really unique part, importantly, I thought, what kept me here, right? And it's my wife and kids ultimately. I thought, how do I get my wife and kids to talk to other people? And I quickly realised that was ridiculous. And I also realised that not everybody has a wife and kids, but everybody has a parent, everybody has a mate, or at least had one at some stage. And so I approached defence families impacted by suicide, bereaved by suicide, a parent, a partner, a child, a mate, and also then a soldier who attempted their own life but survived and is glad that they're still here. And I asked each of them to give me some words if they could say one more thing to somebody. And so put their words on the plaque as well, on the memorial. And so they act as a pretty powerful set of statements there for someone who's vulnerable to read that, step back, seek help and seek life.
Just get through this moment, get through this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
I've only ever said this on the pod once, and I said it a bit flippantly, but on the 31st of December 2011 at 5 p.m, when it was midnight on New Year's Day in Australia, I put my 9mm into my mouth, like sitting in my little hut. I was just so alone and just felt so like desperate at the time. And I just remember it wasn't cocked, it was loaded, so I won't say it was, that close, but I tasted it. And and it was actually something that I was down the path, but I still think I was quite away from the moment. But this is a human experience here, and it doesn't matter whether you're guy, girl. It's not even a military experience. This is just a human experience that it's okay to be able to not be okay sometimes, but we just got to help each other get through the moments, and the sun will hopefully rise again. I don't know if that's too cliche to say, but just get us through the moments.
That's right. It is a moment.
Yeah. And, one of my best mates, I remember, just after I met my wife, committed suicide. And I remember having to, he committed suicide in the bath. And for some reason, when we went over to their house, probably an hour after his body was taken away, for some silly reason, I cleaned the bath. I don't know why, but I just know why. Well, Kev, in terms of Cor Infinitus, it's obviously super important work. I don't often talk about, to be honest, I almost sometimes take the other approach where I don't talk about suicide a lot in VBC, because I try and think of it as a bit more of a lighthouse moment, that we can show people that there is aspiration on the other side. But let's not be flippant and sort of forget about the people who are still living in this space as a result of their service.
Yeah, absolutely. We are everywhere.
Yep.
And none of us ever know what's truly going on for another person, right? And we, how you going today, Kev? Yeah, I'm good, mate. How you going, Pete? Yeah, I'm good, mate. Yep. We are getting better at talking about it, but we still have so far to go for us to be able to really be moving the needle. And we do need to be more open about it. We do need to be able to have those conversations. And importantly, when we ask somebody how they're going, whether it's "Are you okay?" or whatever the case may be, and I would encourage people to ask the question more than once, 2, possibly 3 times.
You sure, mate?
Yeah, you sure, mate?
You really sure?
How are you really going, right?
Yeah, it's okay to have a yarn if you need.
We've then got to make sure that we're prepared for the answer to be, yeah, actually pretty shit, mate. Yep. Right? We've got to be prepared for that to be the answer, and to have a conversation, and to be prepared for that conversation. Just know that you don't have to have the answers. You don't have to be a counsellor, right? Even if you don't know what to say, if you're the one who's going to say you actually feel pretty shit, you don't know what to say. Just start talking, right?
There was a night probably 4 years before I joined the army. I would have been in my mid-20s or something like that, and I just had a really brutal personal situation happen. And I actually called Lifeline that night. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I was half pissed. But even just having someone to listen and talk to I never thought I would have been the kind of person that would have called Lifeline. But I actually was that desperate. I just I thought, shit, I just need to speak to someone. So in terms of this podcast, what do we do here? Like, if you're feeling, if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling like you need help, just talk. Call me, call you, talk to anyone.
Talk to anyone, right? The act of talking actually does so much. We can have stuff mulling around in here and ruminating and always come back to the same answer, right? The same answer is not necessarily positive. But when we actually verbalise what it is that's going on, then we actually hear what it is that we're saying in a different way to when we're just thinking it. We're already telling ourselves what the answer is and what the next bit is.
Yeah, it's funny,
but when we're verbalising it, right, a different process takes place. And we can actually, without realising it, start to come up with our own answers, our own solutions, or we can actually start to see some of the folly of what it is that we're thinking. And now, don't get me wrong, it's not necessarily going to solve everything there and then, right? When I was staring at ending my life, the conversation in my head, I knew that what I was doing or about to do was wrong, was stupid, right? But it was less bad than the other options of staying around and all the rest of it. But it was all going on up here, right? Being able to actually verbalise it, particularly with another person, and the role of the other person is just listen. Like, Lifeline counsellors are really, really good at listening, right? They're good at talking, but they're way better at listening, right? And for you, if you're troubled, then talk. And that process you go through, you may just hear some things come out and you go, hang on, that's craziness. Or, hey, that's actually, what I just said isn't true and I can see that isn't true. Or here's a solution that came out.
It's really interesting what you said about the verbalisation bit. After we had our firstborn, he had this chronic condition where the doctors were basically like, oh, just keep, he had with his breathing, and he was stopping breathing like 10 times a minute. And doctors are like, oh, just sit and watch him and just make sure he doesn't stop breathing at night. So that's an 8-week-old baby. So my wife and I just sat and watched this child for months, literally just for months, and we didn't sleep. And I was getting all of these full-on paranoid, focusing on death, and I would just see people walk down the street. I'd be like, oh, well, they're going to die and you're going to die and everything. And I was just consumed in this sort of, it's like death all around. And then I just ultimately had to go see a psych. But within only 2 sessions, just speaking it out and just literally, like you said, verbalizing it, it almost took all the pressure off.
Yeah.
I'd just been manifesting. But just a couple of sessions, the first one, I really didn't want to talk because I didn't know this one, want to trust one. Second session, I just blurted for half an hour, and I walked out of there, and it was just my thing. I didn't need to go back, but that was it, almost like it solved the problem just by being able to verbalise it. So, mate, and this is why Cor Infinitus is such important work.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Because what we do is we provide somewhere tangible for families to go and mourn and grieve and hope and heal. We provide somewhere tangible for people to go and have conversations, right? The comments on the side of the memorial from those 5 people are designed to get people talking and have conversations. And there's now 22 of them around the country. And at the macro level, Cor Infinitus is designed to open up conversations around not only veteran suicide, but suicide more broadly, and absolutely for the families, to make people think about the families as well, and making sure they don't get left behind. We make sure these memorials are put with other military memorials and places of remembrance, right? So to make sure they're not put off in the corner and shunned. And so, yeah, we've now got 22 memorials around the country: Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, and now Northern Territory. And our aim is to put one in every city, suburb and town around the country. And I know that's a massive order. There's 17,000 cities, suburbs and towns around the country. But one day at a time, one location at a time, then we'll get there. And we rely on a decentralised approach to it. I don't have a Cor Infinitus truck where I have half a dozen memorial, concrete blocks in the back with plaques, and I go up, dig a hole, chuck it in, say, there you go, town XYZ, there's your Cor Infinitus memorial. We rely on local champions identifying a place in their town, in their suburb, to go, I'd like to see one of those here. And then they consult the stakeholders. We give them all of the support, the files and all the rest of it, make sure that the wording, the symbology is standardised for psychological safety, and it's been endorsed as psychologically safe by Open Arms, Mates for Mates, and North Queensland Primary Health Network. And but the local champion consults with stakeholders, holders, gets the permission as required. They look for source for funding, or we can help point them in the right direction sometimes for that, depending on where it is. And that way, any funding gets spent locally. Yeah. It's not me. There's ownership locally, because the stakeholders are involved. There's a local champion. There's a dedication ceremony to unveil it. And it becomes an important part of that local community.
I can only think of what an emotional event it must be, not only for people who may be allowed to publicly grieve, with an acknowledgement of their pain and the pain of their loved one. But mate, I don't think that's a somber note to leave on. I think it's actually an uplifting note to leave on. From a lad from Katoomba, mate, you've done some pretty amazing things in the world. Like, I don't know, like Albion Street, did you grow up on, or Mort Street, somewhere up there?
Yeah, Twynham Street, in between Albion and Mort, that's it.
The one that ran in between the two?
Yeah.
But mate, first of all, the service career and doing what you're doing, like, some pretty hefty boxes to tick there, man, in terms of like Australia's first, maybe not only, but Australia's first ever air assault by Aviation Corps. Mate, something, I know you, again, don't like smoke probably, but you don't get DSCs for no reason. And mate, what a collective team effort that represents for the people who served with you on that day. Yeah. But mate, are we allowed to talk about Brisbane? Did you chat to the... Okay, so on the 21st of April, so that's 2026, just in case you're listening to this, in months and months and months' time, we're going to do an Anzac dinner at the United Services Club in Brisbane. It's like in the heart of the city. It's going to be like a veteran business community, networking get-together, reflection event. But Kev will be there, and we'd love to make that event, we'd love to make it a fundraiser for Cor Infinitus and the work he's doing. So if you're listening to this in the next couple of weeks and you're going to be in Brisbane and you want to like meet Kev, hear his story, but more importantly, come and hang out with birds of a feather flock together, and let's see if we can raise some money for Cor Infinitus and the great work that you're doing, mate.
Yeah, Pete, brilliant, mate. Thank you. yeah, really, really grateful that you're opening that up for Cor Infinitus to receive some proceeds there for the charity that we do. And yeah, I'm really thrilled to be there. Looking forward to speaking and sharing the view with others who are there.
And mate, thanks for sharing some of your stories. But I always tell my kids, you got to earn your stories. You can't take anyone else's stories, mate. And you've certainly earned a couple that you can share at your leisure.
Yeah, absolutely. They're good fun. As I say to people, kept me off the streets for 20 odd years, so that's good.
Yeah, mate. Let's get back on the streets now. Right, let's leave it a wrap, mate. It's a pleasure to have a chat with someone from my humble little small town of Katoomba, and just to be, I've always heard of this Kev Humphreys guy, and like it's funny that after just hearing about you for 30 or 40 years, and I knew you always went into the army, and I'd always heard the stories about, you're flying and, just that kind of military gossip about what happened in Afghanistan and flying Chinooks in combat. But it's just a real privilege, and I just thank you for sharing your stories, mate, and coming to say good day.
Mate, Pete, thanks for the invite, mate, and thanks for having me on the pod.
All right, let's wrap it there. Cool story. I don't have much more to say, so I'm just going to wrap it. I'm Pete Liston. This is the Veteran Business Community Podcast, and out.